What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. My name is Lucas Wenzel, and today we are talking about 10 players that you should be looking to stash ahead of the Week 2 slate and ahead of next week's waivers as well. But before we dive on into that list, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with Fantasy Pros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver ad. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you got to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today. Our first stasher this week is Los Angeles Rams wide receiver Demarcus Robinson, who's rostered in 21% of leagues. With Puka Nacua placed on injured reserve, there is ample opportunity for Demarcus Robinson to have weekly fantasy value. It was clear he was the wide receiver too after Nacua left the game, as Robinson played only 6 less snaps and ran 4 fewer routes than Cooper Kupp. The biggest reason he was one of my favorite stashes prior to Week 1 was because of how much I love this Rams offense. Stafford looked great in Week 1, completing nearly 70% of his passes for 317 yards. Even going back to last season, when Robinson was given the opportunity from Week 13 on, he was the wide receiver 12 in PPR formats, and Puka Nacua was healthy during that stretch. The Rams draw a date with the Arizona Cardinals this week, whose secondary hasn't made much progress since the 2023 season. If Demarcus Robinson is still floating out on the waiver wire in your league, he is the easiest stash ahead of Week 2. The second player this week is running back Chandler of the Minnesota Vikings, who's rostered in 29% of leagues. It may seem like Chandler is just a handcuff for Aaron Jones, but his Week 1 numbers would say otherwise. Chandler played 20 of the Vikings' 55 snaps compared to Aaron Jones' 30. He also ran only 3 less routes than the seasoned vet and even drew 3 targets on the afternoon. Chandler likely won't outright supplant Aaron Jones, but it's also clear that Aaron Jones isn't going to be a workhorse. Of the Vikings' 23 running back rush attempts, Jones only handled 14 and Chandler was given 8. Now, Chandler's 2.1 yards per carry in Week 1 left a lot to be desired, but considering he still mustered up 7.2 fantasy points, there could be sneaky standalone value here. Not to mention, Aaron Jones doesn't have the cleanest bill of health in the NFL, and if anything does happen to Jones, Chandler steps in as the running back 1 for the Minnesota Vikings. Next on our list is Indianapolis Colts wide receiver Adonai Mitchell, who's rostered in 27% of leagues. Here's the reality with AD Mitchell. His day could have been substantially better if Anthony Richardson didn't overthrow him twice for touchdowns. We'd be talking about him scoring 20 fantasy points on the week as the number 1 waiver wire pickup, instead of only 1.2 fantasy points, and why you should still be stashing him. That's it. All it would have taken was for even one of those 2 plays to go differently. That's why AD Mitchell is still such a great stash. It's not great to see that he was outsnapped and outproduced by Alec Pierce, but what's clear is that the explosiveness is 100% there. The speed is there. He was leaving dudes in the dust on the perimeter in Week 1. AD Mitchell is dangerous, and once he and Anthony Richardson connect on a chunk play, the narrative will flip entirely. Another rookie you should look to stash is MarShawn Lloyd, running back for the Green Bay Packers, who's rostered in 10% of leagues. I know, he didn't play in Week 1. It was Emmanuel Wilson who saw 4 carries, drew 3 targets, and racked up 48 total yards. So why am I still interested in stashing MarShawn Lloyd? First and foremost, Lloyd returned to practice earlier this week in limited fashion, which is a positive sign that he could return sooner rather than later. And what we can conclude from Emmanuel Wilson's Week 1 usage is that Matt LaFleur doesn't want to give Josh Jacobs the Kyren Williams treatment. 73% of the snaps is still a strong number for Jacobs. He was also limited at practice earlier this week with a back injury. Now, I don't anticipate this being anything to be worried about, but considering the Packers spent a 3rd-round pick on the USC product, he could handle a notable slice of the backfield when he returns. Lloyd is likely only a stash candidate if you're in a deeper league, so if he is still available, it wouldn't hurt to stash him earlier than your league mates. Another Los Angeles Rams player you should look to stash this week is tight end Colby Parkinson, who's rostered in 29% of leagues. I say this every year. The tight end position is a vast, desolate wasteland in fantasy football, and considering only 5 tight ends put up double-digit fantasy points in Week 1, we need to stash upside when we see it. Just like Demarcus Robinson, Puka Nacua's absence is going to open up more opportunity for Parkinson. The Rams are looking to make sure their $21 million investment is on the field, as Parkinson played 69 of 78 possible snaps against the Lions in Week 1 and ran the most routes of all tight ends. That led to 4 receptions on 5 targets for 47 yards and a tight end 7 finish in PPR formats on the week. Now, I don't want to leverage 8.7 fantasy points like it's a phenomenal outcome, but on any other week, it would be a no-brainer to pick up the tight end 7 if more opportunity was being opened up to them. We've seen Tyler Higbee flirt with top 10, top 12 value in the past on this Rams offense, and Colby Parkinson now has the same path. Another tight end you should consider stashing is Tucker Kraft of the Green Bay Packers, who's rostered in only 3% of leagues. This is definitely for those of you in deep leagues, but the week 1 numbers definitely favor Tucker Kraft compared to Luke Musgrave. The snap shares weren't even close in Brazil. Kraft played 47 more snaps than Musgrave and ran 22 more routes. Considering Kraft wasn't 100% healthy coming into week 1, this was a relative surprise. Kraft also ran a healthy 1.76 yards per route per fantasy points data, and he should be running far more than 30 routes on 64 snaps as he continues to get healthy. Now, full recognition that as of this recording, Malik Willis projects to be his quarterback in week 2, but that may not be the worst thing in the world. Kraft can be the safety blanket for Willis underneath, and while it won't be dynamite plays, we just talked about how Colby Parkinson was a tight end 7 in week 1 with only 8.7 fantasy points. We're going back to the Rams well and talking about stashing wide receiver Tyler Johnson, who's rostered in 8% of leagues. If Demarcus Robinson is already picked up in your league, I think Tyler Johnson is also a great option. It'll be a tag team effort to fill Puka Nakua's void, but why not throw darts on all these guys when they all showed flashes of upside? Johnson stepped up in Puka's absence, playing 51 snaps and drew 7 targets on 33 routes. The guy caught 5 passes for 79 yards while finishing as the wide receiver 26 on the week, and it's like nobody cares. We all know Cooper Kupp is going to draw a massive amount of targets, but even when Kupp drew 21 of them in week 1, Tyler Johnson was still involved. It also doesn't help that this Rams offensive line is banged up and they'll struggle to run the football. I mentioned earlier, the Rams draw the Cardinals in week 2, who have an exploitable secondary that's projected 49.5 points in this game. If you're in a deep league and need a dart throw, use it on Tyler Johnson. Up next is Carolina Panthers wide receiver Xavier Legette, who's rostered in 14% of leagues. I know rostering any Carolina Panther feels disgusting at this point, but hear me out on Xavier Legette. He led the team in targets on Sunday with 7. He only played 4 less snaps than teammate Deontay Johnson and only ran 4 less routes than him too. Now, I know this Panthers offense looked abysmal. The passing attack found 0 rhythm. This isn't a fun team to talk about, okay? But it's only been 1 week. There's time for the Panthers to piece this thing together. Legette is in a stash that will bring you riches in the next 1 to 2 weeks, but if you're in a deep league and can afford to stash rookie upside, Legette at least flash that in week 1. We're getting deep down the wire with these last 2 stashes, and let's start with Denver Broncos wide receiver Devaughn Vele, who's rostered in only 1% of leagues. This is another offense I feel gross talking about, but at the end of the day, volume is volume, and when it's going to a rookie wide receiver, I'm willing to chase it if I have the room to stash them. The 7th-round rookie out of Utah drew 8 targets and caught all 8 of them in his NFL debut. He was still behind Cortland Sutton and Josh Reynolds in snap share and routes run, but if Vele is going to draw this level of volume, he could have some value in deep PPR leagues. If Bo Nix is going to continue to be a check-down king, the yardage won't be there, but considering Vele still scored 11.9 fantasy points on only 39 yards in week 1, that intrigues me enough to make him a stash and see how he fares in week 2. The last player we'll talk about today is Tampa Bay Buccaneers wide receiver Jalen McMillan, who's rostered in 6% of leagues. McMillan only caught 1 pass on Sunday, but hey, you know what? It did go for a touchdown. Typically, I wouldn't be interested in chasing a 1 reception, 32 yards and a touchdown stat line, but I was shocked when I took a deeper look at his numbers. McMillan led all Buccaneers wide receivers in snaps and routes run in week 1. Yes, more than Mike Evans and more than Chris Godwin. What's clear from that is McMillan will be on the field plenty in future weeks and has the wide receiver 3 role locked down in Tampa Bay. They draw a fun matchup with the Lions in week 2 that's projected for 51.5 points, and McMillan could add on to an optimistic start to his rookie campaign. Alrighty, y'all, that is it. That is all I have for you today, but before we sign off, remember, you can take the guesswork out of waiver wire decisions with FantasyPros Waiver Assistant. It will give you instant analysis on potential moves from over 100 fantasy experts. You'll also discover both the weekly and rest of season impact for every waiver app. All you have to do is visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app. Again, all you got to do, visit fantasypros.com/myplaybook or download the Fantasy Football My Playbook app to optimize your roster today.